My book brings to you the voices of the slaves caught in the fashion industry, and I hope this series of videos will help you to understand some of the issues that people face. In Slave to Fashion, we covered the topic of human trafficking by talking to some of the men, women and children that have been caught up and brokered by traffickers into slavery. In Bangladesh and other developing countries, it's extreme poverty that make children and young people vulnerable to criminal gangs. These criminal gangs often promise a well-paid job in the city or overseas, and their guardians and parents, who are often illiterate, will look at this as an opportunity and not realise that they're actually being duped. When income from the new job doesn't materialise, and worse still, their family member disappears without trace, the family feels guilty and complicit in what's happened and finds it incredibly difficult to go and report it to the police. I went to India and Bangladesh to meet victims of human trafficking and find out what the effects had been on their families. Whilst I was in Bangladesh, I met up with leading lawyers like Sonali Ali, who talked to me about how their activities work on the ground to repatriate victims of human trafficking and rehabilitate them once they come back to Bangladesh. Human traffickers often operate outside garment factory gates in collusion with the factory managers. The problem is worsened by huge corruption in the police. Lawyers, trade unions and workers and victims themselves tell us that if garment workers were paid decently and fashion companies planned their production better to ensure continuous employment, fewer women would end up being trafficked. There are positive stories around human trafficking. There are organisations that are really making a difference. I met Minna in Sonagachi, the red light district of Kolkata, where today she works as a social worker and a social entrepreneur for fair trade business Freeset. Minna's dream is to provide work for more than 20,000 women who have escaped from human trafficking and from the sex trade. Today, the organisation that she works for provides work for about 250 women, one of which is Anandi. Anandi arrived in Kolkata when she was 15 years old. Her mum, she felt no choice but to sell her to a trafficker, a guy called Prakesh, for a small amount of money that paid for her father's operation. And when she arrived in Kolkata, she thought she was going to work in a small garment factory. Instead, she ended up in the sex trade. She tells me about how the madame of the brothel beat her because she didn't earn enough money. Her mother tells the story of how she was longing to see her daughter and very, very rarely heard from her. Manufa is another woman I met who narrowly escaped human trafficking. She was left to fend for her 2 children by her husband. Manufa knew when she met the human traffickers that a job in Kolkata would mean a job in slavery, and she thought seriously about taking her life. She recalls meeting Minna on the road and talking to her about her desperation, and Minna saying, "Don't you understand, there's a fair trade project, maybe you could get trained there and you could work there and support your family by yourself." And she recalls this amazing dream-like opportunity of working at Freeset and coming home with her first pay packet, being able to pay for her whole extended family's food and clothing for her children and education for her children. What's great is for people like Anandi and Manufa that fair trade offers a real opportunity, an opportunity out of human trafficking, but also to avoid human trafficking. But what we need within our fashion supply chains is for each brand to take responsibility of who is working in their supply chain and how those workers got there. The CEOs of fashion companies and their boards need to be accountable for human trafficking alongside exploitation and other forms of slavery in their supply chains. I hope you'll enjoy this series of videos and want to share them with your friends. Do read Slave to Fashion, published by New Internationalist, and join us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. But please, be part of the change.